The first Pikmin was an excellent take on the RTS genre. It did so many things correctly and changed how we perceive RTS games by simplifying the formula, but also made changes that breathed new life into it. It was, and to this day still is, a great way to introduce people to the RTS genre without overwhelming them with keyboard shortcuts and terms like macro management and APM. Going into Pikmin 2 after playing the first game, I didn't want more of the same though. I wanted the second game to take it a step further, no longer act as an introductory RTS game, but add an extra layer or two of complexity in addition to those that the first game had, all while maintaining the same Nintendo uniqueness that the first game showcased. To give an example of what I mean, keep the time limit, but maybe give 45 days instead of 30 and create a bigger world to explore. Introduce new types of Pikmin that can interact with the environment and enemies in different ways than the 3 Pikmin from the first game. Maybe allow for the player to command Pikmin in 2 separate parties across the map and give Olimar special abilities so that while you have the ability to multitask, you need to keep in mind where you're sending Olimar. Things like these are what I wanted for the sequel. New ideas that would make the game more layered, but still striking the perfect balance between simple and complex. Is that what we got though? Well, it's complicated. In this video, I'm hoping to uncomplicate it and explain why I think Pikmin 2 is the perfect example of game designers taking 1 step forward and 2 steps backward with a sequel. In other words, why Pikmin 2 misses the point. Pikmin 2's plot still revolves around Olimar. He returns to his planet after the events of the first game, only to find that the company he works for has gone under and accumulated debt. 100,000 coins to be exact. In order to pay off that debt, you're sent back to the Pikmin's planet, this time with a co-worker named Louie, to collect enough treasure to sell off and pay the money you owe. Before I get into the thick of it, there is one small rant I want to get out of the way first. I really dislike the approach they took to the treasures in this game. Treasures being an extremely generous term. If you've never played the game, the treasures you find consist of real-life garbage, or worthless items. Toy crowns, batteries, yogurt bottles, stuff like that. At first, it was charming and funny to see a Duracell battery or a Danone bottle scattered throughout the planet. Yay, product placement? But as the game went on, that charm faded and I felt like I was just collecting junk. Because I was. The ship parts in the first game felt much more relevant to your mission because you'd literally die if you didn't collect all the ones you needed. The items in Pikmin 2 don't carry that weight because they're literally trash. It may sound strange to complain about, but it mattered. The impact the first game would have on you when you're collecting a rocket piece was much bigger and more memorable than the barely existing impact that Pikmin 2 had on me when I was collecting a bottle cap for the 10th time. I very much remember the last item I collected in Pikmin 1 because of how big of a deal it was. I have no recollection of what it was in Pikmin 2. In the grand scheme of things, it's whatever, really. My experience wasn't soured because of it, it was just rendered less memorable. To some, it means a lot, to others, it really doesn't. Depends on who you ask. To me, it came off as a step backwards from what the first game pulled off, but anyways, I digress. Structurally, the game works a bit differently than its predecessor. Gone are the bad and good endings, it's just one now. Well, sort of, I'll get to that later. Gone are the rocket ship parts replaced with treasures you can find throughout the world. Gone is the 1 item a day method of measuring success because there are now much more than 30 treasures. But most importantly, gone is the 30-day time limit. Now here's where the "it's complicated" statement I dropped earlier comes in. Already I've mentioned an addition to the game that I find to be an improvement and an omission that I find to be a mistake. Going in that respective order, I think the addition of Louie to this game was excellent. Louie doesn't accompany Olimar only for the sake of plot, but for that of gameplay too. With Louie by Olimar's side, you're given the ability to control both of them as hero characters. In most mainstream RTS games, different hero characters are given different attributes and abilities. This isn't the case with Olimar and Louie though, as both of them play exactly the same. This is a good thing though, because it maintains that simplicity that was present in the first game, still making this game accessible to a larger, more casual audience. Now, in theory, the addition of Louie should add a whole new level of micromanagement to the game. You're now capable of controlling 2 different units of Pikmin, which goes hand in hand with the increase in the number of collectible items. You can do things like send Olimar to one side of the map with ground-based Pikmin while Louie explores water areas with blue Pikmin. Or even just leave Louie at the rocket and explore with Olimar, only sending Louie out if you find something along the way but want to move on. Essentially, the player is given more than the handful of ways that existed in Pikmin 1 to manage their time, which is great. This is an excellent way to build upon the first game and complements the 30-day time limit they took that out. With there being an actual functioning rocket to go back to every night, Olimar and Louie don't have to rely on a 30-day life support system. Their boss never told them they had a specific set of time that they needed to collect the money by either, so really you can take as long as you want in this game. In an interview with IGN, producer of Pikmin 2, Takashi Tezuka, said that they did away with the time limit to allow for greater freedom in regard to exploration and familiarizing yourself with the world. Another goal they had in mind when taking out the day limit was increasing playtime because the first game was criticized for having one that was too short. Now, I'm no game designer, but was there really no better way to go at it than scrapping the whole system? The whole system that, mind you, was what made the first Pikmin so special, among other things, in the first place? If playtime was really that big of an issue, then why not increase the days from 30 to 60, or keep it at 30 but make each day longer? Or fine, remove the 30-day time limit, but do something else like have the difficulty ramp up the more time you take on the planet by having enemies steal the treasure, leaving you having to defeat more enemies to collect that treasure the more time you take. That way, you can take as much time as you want, but you're slowly pressured more and more to hurry up or face a higher difficulty level. Or maybe the longer you take on the planet, the more your rocket falls apart and you need to collect its pieces to get it to work again, or anything. There were so many different ways to approach this issue, why just scrap the mechanic entirely? To add insult to injury, it doesn't even take 30 days to beat the game anymore. I paid off the debt in 17, just slightly over half the length of the original game. Technically speaking, at least. It would be an entirely different story if they scrapped the time limit and made the worlds bigger, but they didn't. The maps are almost exactly the same size as of those in the first game, some possibly even being smaller. So it's not like there's a whole lot to explore with the now infinite amount of time on your hands anyways. On the surface of the planet, that is. I've been trying to dance around mentioning this so far because I knew that once I did, I'd have to get into it, which would take up a good portion of the video, so I wanted to get everything else out of the way first. You're not only exploring the surface of the planet in Pikmin 2, you're also sent off to explore caves. Throughout the world, you'll find several holes, or caves, that you and your Pikmin can dive into. Think of them as dungeons from the Zelda series, in a sense. Once you're in, and you can't leave until you either retreat after a loss or beat the boss at the end. Each cave has a different number of sub-levels, each with a few pieces of treasure to collect and enemies to defeat. Once you've completed a sub-level, you move on to the next one, until you get to the boss in the final sub-level and escape the cave. You can escape the cave at any time if you want, but you need to abandon the treasure you found while in the cave to do so. Otherwise, you can use the designated exits that are provided either at the end of the cave or sometimes on other floors to leave with your treasures. Keep in mind though that you come out with the Pikmin that you went in with, or less, depending on whether or not you lost any in battle. There's no way to get more Pikmin while in the cave. When asked about the caves and why they were added to the game in the same interview referenced earlier, Shigefumi Hino, the director of the game, said, "As they journey deeper underground, gradually they'll lose Pikmin in battle and the number of Pikmin that they have with them will drop. That makes the game feel much more like an action-oriented game than a strategy-oriented one." Action-oriented? Who asked for that? Pikmin was a strategy game. Why is it being reframed to appeal to an action game audience all of a sudden? I don't understand that line of thinking at all. Sure, it could make the game more appealing to a potentially larger audience, but why shift focuses to a completely different audience instead of trying to attract more people to the one you've got? What's worse is that it's like they never even committed to that shift. The game plays like the developers put the ingredients of a strategy game and those of an action game into a blender, but never actually hit blend. They just let it all sit there. They added Louis to add to the strategy and micromanagement the first game had to offer, all while keeping the outside world similar in the sense that they offer plenty of exploration, puzzles to complete, and treasures to collect. This half is the strategy half where you're implored to explore and find secrets in the world around you. Then there are the caves, where I was forced into using one party leader the whole time, except for the one boss fight that makes you use both. I never found a use for using both party leaders because the caves are filled with pretty much only enemies, meaning you don't have the luxury of shifting your focus away from the fight at hand to tend to another matter. Plus, it's not even as if the caves are that big in scope, as each sub-level is pretty tiny and you can only enter a sub-level if both Olimar and Louis accompany each other, leaving even less room for micromanagement. Hence this half being the action half, where it's all about defeating enemies and bosses. And me referring to these two sides of the game as two halves of a whole is really generous, because the caves, the action parts of the game, take what feel like 75% of your playtime in Pikmin 2. These sections are long. Each cave takes about 25 to 35 minutes to complete, and again, time doesn't progress when you're down there. That means that when you exit the cave, you could potentially still have a full day to complete, which could mean anywhere from 15 minutes or less. Hence me saying that I technically beat the game in less days than the original, but that doesn't really mean much when a single day could take longer than an hour if you did 2 caves and explored the outside world. The beauty of the first Pikmin was exploring the vast world around you, all of it connected. Monsters roamed the land and there were pools of water and fire geysers. The land was aesthetically similar but was so varied in the types of enemies, environmental hazards, and bosses that you encountered. Pikmin 2 just keeps the worlds the same size, if not smaller, and compensates with the cave levels. Thing is, the cave levels have almost no charm or interesting parts found in them. They have some puzzles, yes, and memorable enemies, fine. But they don't feel like a part of the world at all. It makes the game feel like it's got hub worlds that take you to different levels in the game, the levels being the caves. That isn't what the original stood for at all. I could go on and on talking about how I just found the caves to be plain boring and how I honestly can't remember one from the other, but then I'd be ignoring the main issue I have with the caves in the first place, their existence. This was an addition to the game that not only took the focus away from what made the first game special, being strategy, but also addressed complaints about the game's playtime in one of the worst ways possible, which is by artificially stretching this out. It's because of the caves that when I did pay off all the debt, I never went back to the game. To clarify, once you pay off your debt, you leave the planet, but accidentally leave Louis behind. This leads to you having to come back to the planet with your boss and having to go through more caves to find Louis. Why would I do that? This whole time, this game has incentivized you to go through these caves only so that you can collect treasure faster and pay off your debt, which, to be fair, they do serve that purpose. But now it wants me to go through 3 more caves, all with more sublevels than the other caves on average, by the way. For what? A true ending cutscene? For all I care, Louis can live on that planet with the Pikmin. I mean, there's no way I'm going back to Olimar's home planet and back before it's nightfall, so if he's dead, there's really nothing I can do about it. The 2 things that killed this game for me were the omission of a time limit and the addition of the caves. Everything else, like adding more types of Pikmin, giving you the ability to control Louis, none of it matters. You can't add components that would have served the original game well, but then completely change the focus of the sequel and expect the 2 to mesh together. That's not how that works. You pick one or the other, or you get the 2 to work together. Pikmin 2 never did either of those. Pikmin 2 tried to appeal to those who enjoyed the first game while attracting in a newer audience that was into something completely different. If you liked the first game and enjoyed this one too, more power to you, but I couldn't get into this game like I did the first. So unless Pikmin 4 has been announced at this point because this video is going up after E3, that leaves Pikmin 3. I could do a whole rhetorical question thing where I ask whether or not it fixes the issues I had with Pikmin 2 and lead up to the next video, but I already played Pikmin 3 years ago, so I already know where I stand on that. It doesn't mean I'm going to address it now though. In the next video I'll be talking about whether or not Pikmin 3 attempts to address the issues I had with Pikmin 2, and if it does, how and whether or not it works. Until then, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.